calls are down a little bit. They're down to about 1,400 calls for this past month. Normally we're around that 16, 1,700 range. We had about 296 priority one calls. Those are a high priority. And our officers conducted about 290 code 19s. That's where we like to pinpoint one particular area and maybe hang out there for 45 minutes to an hour and see what's going on. Our statistics, we're catching up a little bit because normally it takes a little while and we're into our second month of the year. So we're looking at statistically we're down for the year where we ended last year on a high note. So far we're down, which is good. Even the car breaks is what I spoke about in the last few meetings. Those seem to be leveling off and going downward, which is a good sign. I'll try to check. It's a little tough for me while I'm talking and giving an update to check the chat room at the same time. So I can always hang out and check the chat room and answer some questions afterwards, if that's okay. Because I saw a couple of questions just popped up. Or if Tony, if you want to ask me, it's up to you. However you want to handle it.
I can relay them to you if you like.
Okay. Let me just finish. Up my little update, and then and then maybe we can get to some questions. So let's see. Unfortunately, I have to report it. Everyone probably knows by now. Last Monday evening into Tuesday morning, we had a very serious crash on Chelsea Street, outbound by the oil tanks. Tragically, two young men were killed in the accident. Their vehicle struck a pole. Looks like tragically, speed and some erratic driving might have played a factor. That's all still under investigation. The following evening, on Tuesday evening, officers from our gang unit were here to monitor the Maverick Landing area. They encountered 5 young men in the Maverick Landing development. An arrests were made. All 5 were arrested, and our officers recovered 5 handguns. I've been a police officer for 35 years, and I don't think I ever recall an incident where we arrested 5 individuals with 5 handguns. Very rare, and very rare here in East Boston. We're grateful that nobody was hurt. No gunfire was exchanged. Our officers did a great job. They made the arrest. Nobody was hurt. 5 handguns were taken off the street. Now it's just up to the prosecution and the courts to go forward with these young men. We'll try to do some intervention with. It was 4 adults and a juvenile. We're going to do some intervention and try to offer some support to the juvenile and a couple of the younger gentlemen. One of the gentlemen, it's a second gun charge, so he's a little bit older. I think that's all I have in my notes. Tony, if you want to open it up for some questions or concerns.
We got a question from Larry Monito asking, do 911 calls usually go down a little when there are snowstorms?
It depends. It depends on I don't really, I've never really looked at that pattern, but they might go down as far as priority 1 calls, crimes in progress, but they might go up as far as motor vehicle crashes, weather related calls, might go up, but maybe, criminal activity calls might go down. I'm not sure, but I'll take a look at that. That's a good question. Maybe I'll have a better answer next month.
Another question that we got was from Gail Miller asking, there was some concern this past week at Charlie's Cleaners on Saratoga. Was that a serious event?
Charlie's Cleaners, I don't see anything. What's that location? Is that St. Edward in Saratoga and St. Edward? Is that right around that area?
I think that's the one.
I'm just not sure. I don't want to speak out of turn if I don't know the exact
Yes.
name. Yeah, so that's the one. I don't see anything. I don't see anything as far as, a part one crime or anything like that. It could have been medical related. I can look into that, and I can get back to Gail. I see
Okay,
that.
yeah.
I see. I kind of see the question popped up, but then did she elaborate a little bit more?
She just said maybe not at the cleaners, but there caused a lot of police presence.
Sometimes we have police presence, fire department, ambulance, they might show up. I know there was a medical emergency around that area, around 1095 Saratoga Street. I'm not sure. Um, I see somebody else is adding a little information to that little.
Larry Zola said it was Sunday at 11 at the lights at Orient Heights.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I wish, I wish I had that information right at my disposal, but I don't see anything that suggest anything serious, like I said, unless it was some sort of medical emergency or something like that. But I can look into it, and I can get back to Gail and let her know.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, anytime. Anything else?
It doesn't look like we have any questions directed towards you.
Okay. As far as really quick, I think I might have skipped over it. As far as Orient Heights is concerned, we don't have any no real high priority calls in that area. Even the car brakes, like I said, the car brakes have significantly dropped. I know there was some issues with some car brakes in the Orient Heights area. So car brakes dropped to 4 for the last 2-week period, which is great for us. We were doing like 12 to 15 in a 2-week period all of last year, and 4 we'd like to get that to 0, but 4 is definitely trending downward, and I don't see anything in the Orient Heights area. So
Nice.
okay.
We have a technical question from Gail. If someone is blocked in by other cars, do police have a policy about towing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if someone is blocked in, we get those calls all the time, especially if somebody's blocking someone's driveway. If you call 911, definitely tell the 911 operator that you want the car towed, not just ticketed, because sometimes the officers will come by, maybe just put a ticket on the vehicle. If you don't let the dispatcher know that you need to get out, and you need to that you want the vehicle towed, so maybe make it specific. Sometimes the officers, we might be a little busy, so we think it might just be an enforcement, and we'll go by, we'll put a ticket on the windshield and hope that the vehicle moves eventually. But if it's blocking your driveway or blocking your handicap ramp, let the 911 operator know that you want the vehicle towed.
Thank you. I don't
Okay.
see anything else popping up in the chat. Oh. Okay. Oh, Gail said that police responded and said they would not tow in this situation.
All right. Maybe I can get back to Gail, and I don't know. I'd have to get a little more specific on what the situation was. That's not really an acceptable response. But I'd have to know what the situation was. Sometimes people will want a vehicle towed if it's just a couple inches over the driveway space, and if we feel there's plenty of space to get in and out, we'll give them a little chance, and we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't know what. I'll Gail, if you want to give me a call at the office in a little while, we can chat a little bit, or give me a call on my cell phone. Yeah, so we can chat a little bit now, and I can get better specifics. I don't want to tie you guys up much longer. So,
All right. Thank you so much for presenting.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Tony. Thanks for having me, and I'll see you next month.
Of course. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. So up next on our agenda, we have the East Boston Transportation Justice Coalition. And they are a coalition of neighbors fighting to unify concerned East Boston residents and voices to find community-driven, equitable solutions to East Boston's transportation changes. They've provided a survey that you can take, and I will just post that in the chat real quick. And who do we have presenting from the East Boston Transportation Justice Coalition tonight? If you wouldn't mind posting in the chat, I can unmute you and let you present. Oh, unless this was, oh, okay. Let me unmute you, Celeste.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I'm also joined by Leo Olson, and I think Magdalena Battaglia will be on as well. My name is Celeste Ribeiro Hewitt, and I'm a member of the East Boston Transportation Justice Coalition. I'm also a member of the Day Square Business Improvement District. My office is right at Spinelli, is right in the middle of Day Square. And Day Square businesses have been coalescing for quite a while to see what we can do to kind of improve quality of life in the Day Square Business District. And that's how we kind of got engaged with the Transportation Justice Coalition with like-minded folks with Empower East Boston, Leo, Magdalena, if you guys know our Harbor Keepers, I'm also on the Harbor Keepers board, and just a lot of folks that have transportation related issues and concerns. So we had our inaugural meeting last week, not last week, rather last month, with upwards of 40 folks in attendance and just sharing a variety of inputs and concerns around transportation here in East Boston, whether it's public transportation, parking, accessibility, walkability, the ability to use bicycles, dangerousness, all kinds of things. There were literally dozens and dozens of topics that were discussed, and essentially the goal of the coalition is to find really workable ways to go beyond just kind of the mentioning and complaining about the concerns here in East Boston. And Leo mentioned in the chat, we heard a lot about Bennington Street, a lot about Bennington Street, and Bennington Street, as you all know, is very unique. There's a strip where there's a lot of drag racing, it seems, and a lot of accidents. Joanne Pomodoro presented at the meeting, and just a lot. So the goal is, and we have a meeting coming up this Thursday, the 18th, is to now take a lot of these issues and concerns and inputs, and we're still gathering more inputs, and to kind of break down into groups and see how we can really tangibly address them, whether it's, I don't want to jump to solution here. But that's kind of the goal. And before we can kind of get to working on solutions and really workshop these items, we want to make sure that we have inputs from a broad spectrum of folks in the community. Although we did hear some about Bennington Street and some of the activity happening at Orient Heights, a lot of it seems to be Eagle Hill, lower Eagle Hill centric inputs. So that's why we're really reaching out to you folks tonight and to the other neighborhood associations to make sure you have an opportunity to give inputs and be heard and have your concerns addressed, and then also to get hands-on in the process. So to that end, I think Leo is posting the link to our survey in the chat. If you would kindly take a few minutes and provide some inputs. And additionally, if you want to email us, he'll drop our email address in the chat if you want to learn more about the Transportation Justice Coalition and get involved. That would be great. And I'm going to hand it over to Magdalena right now too, so she can kind of chime in a little bit about some of the work behind the coalition.
Hi everyone, my name is Magdalena and I'm from the Harbor Keepers, also a community leader on other issues. Thank you, Celeste. I think Celeste covered pretty much everything. I couldn't have said it better myself. So thank you, Celeste, for being so articulate and explaining the issue and sort of what this coalition is about. The only thing I would add really is that what we want to focus on as the coalition is exactly as the name implies, is that we are a group of people, represented different neighborhoods, representing different interests, but it is community led. Whereas the city, started a process through sort of a community group. Well, I'm not sure if it's a sort of like city led / community based transportation, group. For us, it's like we are the people, right? We are the people. We are the impacted folks. we are representing every neighborhood, and we really want to come to a place where we find solutions, because as you all know, we're impacted on many levels. And this past week was a perfect example with the incredibly tragic accident. And even though we don't know the circumstances of the accident, the bottom line is that a whole stretch of Chelsea Street is really like an industrial barren land, right? And it's a pass through. So I, just want to reiterate that it's going to take a lot of effort, sort of community-led effort, to really kind of coalesce all the groups and interface with all the different city departments and state agencies to really be a little bit stronger in the way that we advocate and the way we've advocated in the past. So it's a really cool group. I mean, honestly, a cool group of folks, and we make it fun. We make it lighthearted. It's a heavy topic, but we really make it a comfortable space for everybody to really provide feedback and try to work together to try to come to, to some, to arrive at some solutions. So that's the only other thing I wanted to add. Thank you.
We're glad to answer any questions if folks have any right now. Otherwise, please reach out to our email and send any inputs or questions there. And we hope to have folks complete the survey and then join us also this Thursday to get involved.
Thank you. And we can include those links to the event and your email and the survey again in our meeting minutes when we send that out to folks after this meeting.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. Let's see. Next up on the agenda, we have updates coming from our city councilor, Lydia Edwards. She served as the city councilor for the 1st District, which includes East Boston, Charlestown, and the North End since 2017. Let me just make sure that she is able to. Oh, I don't see. There was a Lydia in here earlier.
I'm here.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you're at the top now because you have your camera on. Sorry about that. Right, you can take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. We actually set up a slideshow to be a little bit efficient, and it's of our end of the year report. And I kind of want to go through that and then open up for questions and any other questions or updates of what's going on. I'll tell you, no, I am not running for mayor, in case anyone was curious. I'm not interested in it. And no, I don't know who's gonna win. I don't know who has money on that race, who thinks I'm gonna be able to tell you that. I don't know. And I will tell you, yes, a lot of the way the development culture in City Hall is going to change with Mayor Janey. To what, I don't know. And so she is still literally getting her transition team together to give her orientation for how all the departments are working, including ONS. And so I firmly stand by her, and I believe her success is our success. But I want people to be patient with this transition. I may not have as many answers to what I'm saying as I normally do, because she's not come to East Boston. She did not make a commitment about if a single family comes down, then a single family goes up. She didn't make those commitments. And so right now, I'm going to try and get as much, when I can get her time, which is very limited, I'd like to give her an orientation on development, our concerns, and commitments made by the mayor, and then also how we feel in many cases the ZBA still is falling way below standards of operations and not being inclusive and really not reflecting any kind of real analysis, and how she as a mayor can help us, acting mayor, be treated with more respect. So I just wanted to say that up front. I don't know, Gio, are you ready to share your screen?
Yeah, Tony, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay.
Sure.
That didn't work. Hold on one second.
No worries.
Let's see, anything else? Nope. We have had some requests, but mostly the Snow Angel program, for example, we managed to match people who did sign up in time and have people responded to and volunteering for their neighbors. So we continued that. We've been lucky in that a lot of our snow dumps have been gone in about a day or so. And we've also had some additional requests. Oh, here we go. With regards to, okay, all right. Well, I'll stop there. But okay. So end of the year report we put out, and this kind of summarizes a lot of the work that we did. The biggest project that impacted this particular community, and actually of my entire district, if not the entire city of Boston, was Suffolk Downs. There were a lot of eyes on that project, and they will continue to be on that project. What was approved was initial zoning only that can be amended, that can be changed. And want to say I'm proud of the hooks and the accountability that we put in on the developer, so that every time a building goes up on his site, he has to contribute additional funds to the neighborhood stabilization fund he established, so that every single time there's a change and an amendment, he's supposed to put out a robocall in more than one language to East Boston, so that the amendments just don't happen quietly and cutely like they did at the Seaport. And we also wanted to make sure that we expanded our IAG. Thank you to the board members who have done an incredible job thus far, but we wanted to make sure that we got a continually large amount of people only from East Boston to be on that IAG, to hold the developer accountable for the environmental impacts of Belle Marsh, for affordable housing, for creating a real neighborhood, instead of just making sure that there's a bunch of luxury units that no one lives in. What we also got done together is we increased the 13% to 20% with certain percentages of that money coming to East Boston right now, which $5 million, which is the next box, is a stabilization fund that will be set up to be independently controlled by those of us in East Boston. And we will be the only neighborhood that has this fund. I made sure that it is going to be held in trust by the city of Boston, so not individually in anyone's bank account. There has been some controversy about that. But the trust will be a legal entity that I will pass legislation specifically at the city council level to make sure that it is our money, and that people in East Boston will come in. The city has agreed to do the accounting, the annual reporting, and making sure that we follow all GAAP standards of accounting and whatnot. But for the most part, those funds are there, and it's a starting fund as far as I'm concerned. I have no problem, and I have been shaking down developers already to contribute into the fund. Maybe I shouldn't use the term shakedown. Let's say encouraging them strongly that they should be a part of all solutions for helping us to have affordable housing and creating ownership opportunities, helping people with down payment assistance. Those are all the things that this money could be used for, and it shouldn't be a finite amount that goes down. It should be increasing. You want to make money in East Boston, you got to make sure that we can help our neighbors to stay here. We also made sure that there was a wider range of incomes. We wanted the average income to come down. It was too high for the affordable units at 70%. We got that down to 60% on average. We also noticed that almost 70% of the entire campus, or so about 7,000 of the 10,000 units, were single bedrooms or studios. And that was ridiculous. So we got that closer to almost 50% of 2 to 3 bedrooms for families. We want a neighborhood, and we want to mix, and we want people to be able to come and stay. We also, in the last minute, as the pandemic was getting worse, we squeezed the developer a little bit more for about, I really should stop with these kind of aggressive vocabulary that I'm using. We encourage the developer to contribute to help people who are suffering in East Boston, especially from the pandemic. And he agreed to pay another $400,000 just for rent relief that will be distributed within East Boston only. And the city agreed to match that in the budget, which I'll be talking with Councilor Janey, soon to be Mayor Janey, about that match commitment that is in the zoning documents for another $400,000. These are temporary funding mechanisms that would just go to East Boston residents. And it would be, it's separate, though not in conflict with the city's rent relief program, of which East Boston was the #1 neighborhood requesting assistance. So we have people struggling in our neighborhood. We all know this. I want to thank the mutual aid folks in Eastie who got right on the ground and helped people. We also got Tom O'Brien to commit to the fair housing amendment that I drafted and passed, that really requires him to always look at the equitable implications of not just where you're placing the buildings, but who can live there. Are you building all the affordable housing units on the far end by the highway, or are you building some closer to the T station so people can have access to work? It's those kinds of bits and pieces of analysis that really make sure we don't end up repeating a lot of the bad decision making and the segregating decisions that we've made before in our zoning. We believe you can plan better. We know we can, and it's just a matter of forcing developers to do that, and the city as well. We wanted to make sure that we had, and one of the most widely attended forums we had, because we had additional forums on top of the 2 that the city put in. We had 4 that were multilingual and had babysitting, and it was overwhelmingly by East Boston residents. And then the one that was the biggest was the jobs. And they came in, and we wanted to make sure that we got the entire campus would be PLA under a project labor agreement, which means for the next 10 to 15 years or 10 to 20 years, the jobs as we're building out and growing will be union. And it wasn't enough to just get that. It was also to make sure that those union jobs are piped into our high school, piped into job training programs for our East Boston residents. And that training includes just not only in trades, but also in English language. And so we got $1 million for workforce development, but also another $1 million, which we forgot to include for just English language learners to make sure we are getting a pipeline ready to go. Commitments to daycare facilities was very important as we have a grow. We lack them in East Boston right now. We wanted to make sure that we didn't build another neighborhood that didn't have enough. And I already mentioned the IAG. So this process doesn't end with the BPDA vote. It literally allows it to start. This neighborhood, we don't back down, and we keep coming back, and we'll keep coming back for more. As each time he comes back, he has to give additional funds. We also will be holding him accountable to the commitments that he made. And that's why it was so important that we not only recorded them, that we wrote them down, but we also expanded the IAG so that more people who were part of the process are now part of holding him accountable as the time goes on. And I think that's one of the most, I trust this neighborhood more than I think any other one to be able to move and impact a large institution, as we've had a lot of training with Massport. So the next one, yeah. I had mentioned the Fair Housing Amendment just above, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about what it does. Essentially, it's trying to counter displacement, and it's trying to counter a lot of this, the segregation and the patterns that we had in the past with some of the zoning that we chose. And it wasn't just about race. It was about who got clean air. Whose communities got a highway through it, or more than one? Whose community was told you get a highway and you get an airport? And why were they told those things? You know, there was a lot of economic discrimination. Poor people of all colors weren't able to stand up and say that this is my neighborhood and you're disrespecting us. And that happened not only in East Boston, it happened in Chinatown. And you find with asthma rates of children to this day are still higher because of how people planned for us, for the economic interests of other people. And this is saying, no, you need to plan for plan with us, and also plan towards equity. We need to really honestly ask ourselves, are we going to let this, another seaport happen? And I refuse to. And I think it has a lot to do with setting a goal and a standard towards equity in the planning stage. We're the first city in the country to actually say, you know what, when you zone, maybe you should plan towards equity. Since you guys get to tell developers what they have to do, why don't you actually tell them they have to do right by a neighborhood, for heaven's sakes? And put that immediately in the zoning. And so that is also the best part, because it's one of the few areas where you get to leverage power over a private actor is in zoning. Otherwise, for the most part, you're going to find a lot of the affordable units and a lot of the I guess more diverse units are going to always be on city land or city property. Well, we don't have a lot of that. So we needed to make sure we're planning towards beautiful, diverse, economic diverse, racial diverse, making sure that we have a home for families, and making sure that people's income doesn't mean being poor means poor health, poor access to transportation, if you live in a food desert right now, you can't get to a grocery store. And also, by the way, your schools are going to be horrible as well. That should not be at all the definition of being poverty. And I believe we may not be able to perfectly plan our way out of it, but damn it, we at least need to try and see it. And if we don't even see it as a city and plan and push and demand developers cough up the money for it, then I think we're failing our constituents. Next. So coming to you very likely this fall is a charter initiative. I'm sure you may have heard about this. I've introduced this to change our city charter. It was a direct response to the budget vote. If you would recall, in June of last year, there was a contentious vote about back and forth about a lot of people wanting to vote down the budget, a lot of people wanting me to vote for the budget, and a lot of, I think, majority of people having no idea what powers I have as a city councilor, which is it's up or down on $3 billion. And what I'm proposing is an actual adult conversation. It's not so much as more power, but I would say more of a check on the mayor's power, whoever the mayor may be. And what it is allowing for the back and forth. Right now, the mayor introduces the budget. We do a little dance and vote down the budget. It means nothing. The mayor comes back with a budget that he thinks is better, and then we vote for it. That's it. $3 billion decision. I don't believe that that's actually representing your interest, nor do I feel like I'm earning the tax dollars that you pay for my salary with that. But what I do think is that you should see me fight for you. And the process that this budget charter amendment would do is allow for the budget to be introduced by the mayor still, so we can't over budget, stays within what the monies that we have. The city council, instead of doing a little song and dance of uselessness, would turn around and get to work until midnight and be doing zoning or doing amendments on the floor for our districts. And you would hear us fight for it. And I would have to get consensus from my colleagues. And we go back and forth and trade and talk in front of you. And then we produce that back to the mayor. The mayor could say, okay, good, we've come to consensus. The mayor could say, I don't like those things, and put some things back and do so on and so forth. And in order for us to override the mayor's final decision, we would need 2/3 of the city council. We're literally trying to operate like the State House does, back, forth. And that's it. And that's what but I've always committed to tell you what I want to do, but ultimately you will be the making the decision, because it's coming on the ballot, provided the language is okay with the Attorney General. It'll come on the ballot and you will decide if that's a back and forth that you want me to have. And if you don't, I don't take it personal. I'm just proud that I'm able to offer this option to you and organize around it, and you make your decision. But I think that's more empowering. So next. So here's the one thing that I think impacts most civic associations, and that I'm very excited about what we got done. You know, the zoning ZBA from day one has been the bane in most people's existence, mine included. And from the way that I have watched people get chewed up and spit out after waiting for hours to speak, watching people, unless they bring their own translator, they can't speak at all. Coming there and finding out that it's been deferred for the umpteenth time. These are all things that we said enough is enough. And so we filed a home rule petition, which means we have to go to the State House to change our zoning. Boston is one of the few cities that does. And in that, we had many, many suggestions for a more efficient ZBA. The mayor took that, we sat down and had a good conversation, Mayor Walsh and I, and he took a lot of it and said, there are some things that we could just do. Whether we make them law or not, we can just do. And that's what EO stands for, executive order. So he went ahead and did an executive order wherein we required board members to recuse themselves on properties with conflict of interest in the past 5 years. It instituted electronic notices. So hopefully within 18 months, so that'll be about June of this year, there should be all the projects that are pending will be online, and you can click on them and sign up and put your email there so you can get all the notifications about them. You'll be able to see their plans because they'll be able to be submitted online. You can look at them at your leisure. You'll be able to also get notified if it's been deferred, if the plans have changed. This is really an exciting change. It seems so huge. It really shouldn't be this big of a deal to be able to just get an email, but I think it's worth celebrating. And so what also has happened already is there's been a map. I think Gabriella can post in the chat later, a map of all the zoning projects pending. And so that you could actually watch what's going all around in the neighborhood. We also required quarterly reports on variances and use permits. Why is that important to see on a quarterly basis? Because I don't believe we've ever had a comprehensive understanding of which neighborhoods are overly burdened by the variance process. Because it seems like, oh yeah, it's a lot, but there are a lot of neighborhoods that think they're getting a lot when they're really not. And then there's some that have no idea how much their zoning is changed by variance. We do in East Boston, but we also don't know what kinds of variances. And I think the ZBA should be honest about that. Are you giving out more FAR variances over height? FAR may be bothersome to some, it may not be to others. Height, I would say, was probably the biggest pain for most people. So it's those kinds of like, let's understand what's actually being forced to change project by project. And ultimately, when we go, because we're in the middle of Plan East Boston, when we say there's certain things we're okay with changing, we can say, well, majority of the variances are actually just for FAR. We're okay with maybe increasing it a little bit. We see that actually too many of the variances for height go too high, so we're not okay with that. But we don't have that comprehensive report, and I think the city should be honest about that. We want language accessibility. I believe if you live next door, you own next door to a building that's going up, you shouldn't have to speak English in order to say you oppose it or you support it. And right now, unless you can get someone to come with you, you're not speaking. I think that's wrong. We also wanted someone to give some neutral guidance. It's an intimidating place to be if you don't have a lawyer. And I think it's absolutely wrong that anyone should feel that they have to have a lawyer in order to go speak at the ZBA. Technically, the ZBA is supposed to work for us. And I don't believe a lot of us believe that. Finally, one thing that we forgot to put up there is LLC transparency. We're going to, there was a part of the executive order was requiring the BPDA to put in, change some zoning language to force people to say their ownership interest in their LLCs when they go to get a variance. So I'm very excited about that because each project sometimes is in its own LLC and it's really one person who's amassed a ridiculous amount of properties all in one. And we don't know that. So, and then so I'm going to go quickly over these two. This Housing Stability Notification Act actually probably may not be relevant as much anymore. So much is changing as housing, but we just wanted to make sure that people knew about their rights if they're going to be evicted. And then in terms of cannabis, we're trying to make sure the process is a little bit more streamlined. And we understand, we set a timeline for the city to respond to applicants. And also that we feel that the neighborhoods are part of the process in a real way. And so we're going to keep pushing for that. And as much as this is legal, and in as much as the process is set up for folks to come in, I am very concerned about corporate weed or corporations, corporate cannabis taking over into our neighborhoods. So next. Oh, okay.
That's it.
So any questions? I see Mike Russo, you have your phone, or you have your hand up.
Lydia, I might have done that inadvertently. No questions from me, but thank you, especially for your work on Suffolk Downs.
Thank you.
We have a thank you from Larry Monito saying, I'm so proud that we have you on our side.
Thank you.
Another thank you from Tara Monito saying you are awesome.
Thank you.
I don't know how to raise my hand. Sorry, I have to figure out how to do that. I have a question. Lydia, that was unbelievable. I'm like floored how much you've done, honestly. Like I honestly didn't know how much you've been doing in the last 2 years. And this is like fantastic. I am like grateful, really grateful for everything and your whole team. So thank you. That's one. Two, For the resident jobs, the Boston resident jobs policy that was, essentially was supposed to be implemented, but it wasn't really fully implemented. And now what you're proposing, which is called the PLA, you called it?
Yep, so the PLA and the jobs policies are two different things. So one is an ordinance from the city for the entire city that, for those of you who want it, it's basically requiring that over half of the people on the project have to actually live in Boston. For construction work especially. People were frustrated seeing a lot of license plates from New Hampshire, from Vermont, no offense to our neighbors to the north, but we wanted Boston residents to get these jobs. Number one. Number two, I think 40% should be about people of color and 12% need to be women on the job. So that's a Boston resident policy. It's been around since 88, maybe. And the percentages have just gone up. The PLA is only for Suffolk Downs. It's a project labor agreement between union labor and Tom O'Brien. And they've agreed to that the jobs will be union.
And those who are in the union, the preference is for local Boston residents.
Yes, and it comes under the entire Boston jobs policy. Now, mind you, we're between two cities, right? So Revere has about 25% and we have 75% of the campus. But so our job is to make sure that on our part, we're just going to encourage them to follow our ordinance period throughout the whole campus. But for the Boston job part, for our part, physically, we need to have that Boston jobs policies. We do not need out-of-state license plates making all the money here.
No, thank you. I'm glad to see that, because with the waterfront development, that's unfortunately what happened. So, and then it'll be supported hopefully with the workforce training, right?
Yes. Yes, so the training will start before the jobs do, which is the point. So we have a pipeline of people, whether it is that they need more training in English, whether they need more training in job certifications, things like that. We need that kind of now. And you know what? Ultimately, if they don't land in Suffolk Downs, they'll land someplace better than where they are now. If you can speak English and you got some training.
Yeah, thank you. That's fantastic. I'm glad to see that, because I've seen the failures in the waterfront development. So this is a great step forward.
Thank you.
We had a question come in from Jane. She is saying, I am concerned about the cannabis proposal in Orient Heights for several reasons, traffic being one of the concerns. And she also said, thank you, Lydia, for representing the residents of East Boston in all of the agenda items in your presentation.
Thank you. Which one in Orient Heights? The Happy Valley one or the one, good Lord, what is that? It's on Bennington? Not Bennington, the smoke shop was, right? G?
Local Roots, I think, Bennington
Local
Street.
Route. Which, is it Local Roots?
Yeah, it's East Boston Local Roots, yeah.
Yeah, no, I believe that actually got support. Was it from this group or from another group, a neighborhood association for that? Actually, it was, I've heard some concerns, but the support for it was actually pretty high. Unlike with other cannabis establishments where I've seen some knockdown dragouts for Local Roots, it was actually pretty. I had some people, to my surprise, say they'd be the first customers. I was like, well, yeah, that's your business. But I've heard actually it was pretty good. But I think to the point about traffic or any other nuisance that comes from any business, please just tell me. What we have learned is the best way to hold them accountable is to tell them you're falling below standard. You're becoming a burden on the neighborhood. And as long as it's treating them like any other business that becomes a burden, we could tell them you need to figure out how to mitigate this. That includes having appointments. Maybe you shouldn't just be drive up any old time. I think maybe for a couple of months you could go back to appointments. That includes there's going to be deliveries at some point, and making sure that if they have a delivery system so that they are, not having too many people come up to get their own individual cannabis product. So it's really calling back to them and treating them like any other business. You're doing wrong or you're doing right, and this is how you need to fix it. And when they don't, or when they don't listen, take away their ability to make money, which is their license.
Gail Miller mentioned that she had sent you questions directly, I guess, in the chat, so they didn't
Oh,
pop
the
up on my end, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. Let me see. Is this an individual chat to me, Gail?
Yeah, yes. Well, I meant for public consumption, of course. Well, I can read them if I can find it. Whoa, just a minute. I'm sorry.
Oh, I see. With the 5-year previous rule on conflicts at the ZBA, is that the one?
Right, that's one of them. I just sent two, but whatever.
Okay, I'll read that one and then I'll go. So with the 5-year previous rule on conflicts at the ZBA, what about going forward with future potential connections with developers, i.e. if you're a realtor with potential to do a business with a developer before you, is that addressed? Well, yes. The issue though is, and this is, let me be very clear, this was a compromise, the 5-year look back. My original language was there should be no real estate developers on the ZBA. There should be no real estate agents on the ZBA. And that was a knockdown, drag out fight between myself, the mayor, and the mayor's legal counsel, and then real estate folks. We were gonna wrestle on this, and we went round for round, and finally they just increased the conflicts going back. And technically the conflicts are also supposed to be in terms of you cannot have any connection, your family members, anybody with who could be a potential person in front of you. So if I'm that 5 years is also supposed to make sure I never sell for that person either. If they come before me and I'm a real estate agent, that developer's there, or is, I'm just looking at Magdalena. So Magdalena comes before me to get her variance, and I say, I vote for it, and I'm a real estate agent by trade, but I'm not supposed to work for her ever to sell. And we all know about that case with Mr. Galvin, who 4 months after approving the variance, then sold the house for a huge markup as a real estate agent. That's exactly what we were trying to get at. But and that's maybe a different mayor is a different conversation about, again, removing real estate agents and developers from the ZBA altogether. That might be a conversation we can have with Mayor Janey.
Thanks, Lydia.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't find your other question.
I can't find it either. So.
Oh, is there a mechanism for our community to buy up some 3-deckers and convert them to truly affordable units, condos, and rentals? Yes, we hope that by in a month that the funding for the stabilization fund is available, and we will have some folks from East Boston. They'll be asked, I guess, to serve on that, and hopefully they'll be releasing the money. Just outright. I would love nothing more than for folks who own a triple decker saying our landlord said he wants to sell or she wants to sell. And so we've raised enough on GoFundMe, but we need $100,000 for a down payment for us to buy the triple decker and for us to own it together. What say you, Eastie folks on the stabilization fund? And I hope they say yes. There you go. That's literally what we want to happen. We want people to be able to own, to be able to be in this, to build that aren't developers. That aren't developers. Now, NOAA's going to apply, CDC is going to apply, but we made very clear to them, while I love them individually, they are not. This is not. This is East Boston's pot. So,
yeah.
of money, not cannabis. Our pot of money. So.
Thank you.
Welcome.
We have a question from Leanne in the chat saying, thank you for all you have done. Are there any plans for investment in infrastructure like water and sewer, more fire and police, etc.?
On Suffolk Downs, absolutely. I think the biggest issue in terms of the infrastructure is we're 2 cities. So what Revere is or isn't going to contribute, we have decided that those infrastructures, the parks, things like that, the city wants to own them. We want to own the sidewalks. We want to own public area. And I think for our civil liberties, we should. The developers agreed to maintain them, but we will own them. So the same rights you have in government spaces, city plaza, things like that, we want you to be able to have. We don't want them owning the sidewalks because they tell you to get off and go. You don't look like you belong here, so on and so forth. When it's privately owned, you don't have the same rights. I don't know how that works in Revere. In terms of fire, again, it's the same kind of balance act. We already have a mutual aid agreement, but who's going to pay for the house, the firehouse, or the police station or sub is still in debate, and it's going to be a three-part conversation: Boston, the developer, and Revere. In terms of increasing outside of that, you know that we're building the police station over in Eagle Hill, is still being built, and I do know that we are. We did get the extra ambulance I think 2 years ago, as we were sharing our one with Massport. We absolutely need to have a check-in though on our infrastructure for safety. And I did just file a hearing order about coordination of our permits. It was a joke. I tried to get through Eagle Hill once, and I ended up making a circle and a circle and a circle, because on either end of the same street, they told me use the other side, and that was blocked. And so I couldn't come down the street. It was between Eversource, Verizon, Comcast, and I think another utility company had all pulled out permits, and there was Boston Water and Sewer, and no one had seemed to coordinate it at all. So it was like it. And what kills me is you can open up the sidewalk, fix one thing. Maybe you should ask if anything else should be fixed before you close it. Because if you close it and then open it up again, it's a ridiculous waste of time and money. And that's the kind of so the hearing order I filed is really to have that conversation about how we can better coordinate that.
We have a question from Joanne saying, are the guidelines for the ZBA in effect for projects in the pipeline? And she also said, all wonderful ideas supporting the community.
Yes, the guidelines for the ZBA are in effect as they were part of an executive order. The only part that didn't get into the executive order are things we had to go to the State House for, which was to add an environmentalist on the ZBA, a seat for an environmentalist, and a seat for urban planner. This was very exciting. Again, they wouldn't let me remove anybody, but and I had a lot of calls from a lot of people. But so they wouldn't let me remove anybody, but they let us add those two, and then also term limits. I believe, while I love dedicated volunteers, there's some people you wonder, it's a volunteer position, and yet you act like you hate us every time we come in front of you. I don't understand. I just feel that term limits would be appropriate.
Okay, Liliana said, thank you. You gave us so much information. Is there anything that is needed from the community to help pass these reforms? We are all very happy to we are very happy to have you representing EC, all of us. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. You know what I'm going to do is to summarize kind of the things that are in the pipeline that need community support and to push through the council. And then anything at the State House, we got to get Dan Ryan. He introduced the home rule last time for zoning reform. Well, I assumed Dan Ryan, he's now a chair, like Adrian is too, that we would get a little bit more heft in getting these reforms through. This is low hanging fruit. Nobody's seat is going away. And I think that we should be able to get those term limits and those new positions. The other stuff, we just got to make sure the executive order continues, even though we may have a new executive.
Mike Russo has a question regarding a creative disincentive to the demolition of existing housing stock.
So now I actually do have a question. I've listened to this discussion and presentation evolve, and we've had a couple of very contentious meetings come before us with proposals to demolish existing 2 or 3 family houses and build a larger building that's 6, 7, 8 units. What we're doing here really is we're sawing rungs off of the property ladder, and we're taking market rate or potentially affordable units off the table and replacing them with luxury units. And Lydia, as you know, you need to be 10 units before you're compelled to build an affordable unit. Well, I have a thought on this. If you tear down a 2-family house, 2 of the units in the new proposal must be affordable. Do you think that that kind of a proposal would create a disincentive to that kind of development, or at least guarantee that if we're building bigger, we're also building more equitably? Your thoughts?
Oh, I think it's a great idea. I never thought about it that way. I think, but if at the end of the day, I'm now required to build 2 units for the 2 that I took down, then my thought is, well, that's 20% of, 10 units then. I'll build 10 units, right? And then I've already met the 13% required for the 10 units, so I'm good to go, right? And I think if it's a disincentive, you might actually be incentivizing people to build bigger then, because now they have to replace units. So they might be saying, well, I'll replace them, but I'm going to build even more to compensate.
Well, an unregulated market creates profit for some and loss for many.
True.
And I'm looking for some creative alternatives to what's going on right now, because I don't think that there's anybody in our community that would disagree that the way that things are is really in need of some serious modification. And
yeah,
we observe time and again. I mean, there's a house on my street identical to our house that is on the market right now, and I'm very concerned that that an outside developer will come in and bulldoze that and put 7 units on our block. Now, I'm not an anti-development person, and I'm not a person that's necessarily opposed to height in the right location. If somebody proposes a 7-story building on my street, that's going to be a problem because it's a residential street. But if somebody proposes a building of that scale in Day Square or in Maverick Square, a business district, a commercial district that can support a building of that scale, well, then maybe that's okay. But what we really need to stop is the idea of 2 and 3 family properties that have historically been multi-generational housing, that have been an opportunity for working class people to own a home, but also potentially house family members or derive an income and defray the cost of their mortgage by having rental units. That's going away, and they're being replaced with condos or market rate development that isn't affordable to anyone. So I don't know if my idea is a good one or a bad one, but it's an idea that I haven't heard from anybody else.
Well, so that means it's a new one, and that's what we need is more new ideas. I did introduce a hearing order to look at our inclusionary development policy. That's the one that says 10 units, 13%. I think we need to look at that 13%.
Yeah, agreed.
And I also think that we need to look at why like 10 units. My biggest concern is, some of the biggest developers are the ones who just stay below 10 and literally just build luxury and triple decker luxury, and do it under the radar and have to meet no standards.
Yeah.
And so
removing
I think
and replacing with 7 is
replacing it, or let's say just they took a dilapidated triple decker and just made it a bunch of luxury condos. You don't need 7 to do that. You just made each condo $1 million. You make your money back, but
correct.
It still displaced people and no one can afford it. And so I also think we should be looking at the portfolio of individuals, not just, if we're going to go 10, how many do you have overall in Boston? Maybe or overall in a neighborhood, not just in the one building. But I'll take that idea as a new one, that we absolutely need to revamp how we define affordable, and also how we tell people, like how we set the standard for who has to do it. So.
Well, I appreciate all of your hard work, and I'm ready to pitch in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It doesn't look like we have any additional questions in the chat. Gabriella did post a link to the EC Times with John Lynn's coverage of Lydia's development proposal. If anyone wants to take a look at that, we can pass that along with our meeting minutes as well once we wrap up tonight.
Thank you. And Gabriella, when you can, could you post the ZBA map, or did you?
I did. It should be up in the chat, but I'll repost it again.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much for presenting tonight and answering everyone's questions.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Right. So next up on our agenda is Renegades Pub. There's a change of majority ownership. You might remember this. I believe it was like the October or November meeting. This was mentioned. but they need to apply for a liquor license again due to the change in majority ownership. So I believe we have Kristen and Katie presenting tonight.
Yes, thanks, Tony.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kristen Scanlon. I am a licensing and permitting attorney here in Boston representing Renegades Pub. As Tony mentioned, Katie Daly, who is the incoming owner of Renegades, is on the call, as well as Peter Ackerman, who is the current and outgoing owner of Renegades. By way of background, I'm venturing to guess everyone's familiar with Renegades, but by way of background, they initially opened in 2017 with, as Tony indicated, a neighborhood restricted license that was first created by the city of Boston in 2014 for 7 different neighborhoods, including East Boston and various Main Streets districts around Boston. And Renegades was lucky enough to get one of them at the time when we applied for it back in 2016. Because of the nature of the license, what we're doing is a bit of a formality, because they didn't pay for a license that you probably read about in the paper that can be upwards of $400,000 that people buy and sell regularly in Boston, although not so much this past year. But because of the restrictions imposed on the neighborhood licenses, you technically can't transfer them with an ownership change. We have to apply for a new license, which is why we're just making sure everyone in the neighborhood knows what's going on with the license. But first and foremost, and this was my message at the abutters meeting as well, and in emails to set this up with the group tonight, there's absolutely no changes proposed for Renegades besides who owns the place, which is Katie. And Katie has been with Renegades since day one, and she's the general manager of it now, and is planning to keep it exactly the same way. They said what they were going to do when they opened it up is they wanted to continue to have this location be a cleaned up version of a neighborhood bar with a really good burger. And I think, and I hope most people would agree, that they delivered on that promise and continue to do so, and are good neighbors in that location. Peter, who is the current owner, as I mentioned, will stay on in an advisory role in case Katie needs any help from him. But other than that, like I said, no changes are proposed. Hours will stay the same, number of employees stays the same, and that sort of thing. So a little bit of a short and sweet presentation, but we're happy to answer any questions or concerns that anybody might have. I will note we're waiting for a hearing date with the city of Boston, but hope it will be sometime in March.
Jane Manning asked, is the owner of Renegades Pub the same as the owner and or developer of the new cannabis location in Orient Heights Square?
No.
Okay, doesn't look like we have, oh, she said thank you. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. Oh, we have one from Gail. Is this establishment an owner of the building or leased?
This is a leased, with the restaurants under a lease, it's a separate building owner. So they're just essentially, it's staying with the same LLC that originally leased the premises, but technically the underlying ownership, as I mentioned, of the LLC that leased the building will take over that lease.
We don't have any additional questions, it looks like. So thank you for presenting tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. Appreciate your time.
Of course. If we get any additional questions, we can pass them along, but doesn't look like we have any right now.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. All right, up next, we have a presentation on the newfangled Orient Heights Design Review Committee that we've been talking about. So I'll start that presentation to help give everybody an idea as to where we are going with this and if the bylaws need to be changed and whatnot. So fancy screen. process proposal. So the purpose of this design review committee is to review and provide feedback on developments before they present at regular OHNC meetings for a vote. Members would pay attention to zoning policies, traffic studies, historic preservation, housing policy, architecture, etc., when considering a development proposal. So meetings, we've proposed that they be held on the first Monday of every month, much like we hold our meetings on the third Monday of every month, usually, but yesterday was President's Day. And they are open to the public. Anybody, especially if you're in a butter, everyone's welcome to come. And these agendas will be sent out via email and posted on Facebook in the same manner that our OHNC meetings are. So one of the questions we had originally was, do we need to amend the bylaws? And we don't need to amend the bylaws, but we do need to vote on the change in development presentation process, because we are proposing that all of the informational development presentations go before the DRC. And when the proposals are ready for a vote, they are placed on the monthly OHNC agenda. I have a link to the bylaws here and I'll share these slides, but I also wanted to put in this little blurb here from the bylaws that goes over subcommittees. So it states here that any actions or recommendations by a subcommittee need to be presented to and voted on by the council at a regularly or special scheduled meeting. And this would be that regular meeting. So what we would like to do, just in an effort in general to help streamline the development presentation process, we're going to start using an online form for developers, architects, attorneys to submit and track the proposals. Currently, we do this all by email, and developers have zero insight as to when our agenda is full, or if it's open, if there's like a time slot they can fit into. So between splitting up these informational and voting presentations, as well as having these public applications that will be open for every month, we are hoping that this will bring greater transparency and ease of scheduling for everybody involved. So currently we don't have any minimum or maximum when it comes to informational presentations to OHNC before a proposal comes up for a vote. So as such, we're not going to instate one. We might request additional information from developers, owners, architects, etc. And any feedback that we provide, any changes that are made from the initial proposal will be noted. And then when the developer comes to the OHNC meeting to present for a vote, we'll also present, what we went over, what was changed. So people are aware of where the proposal started and where it ended up. So hopefully this is good news for developers, attorneys, architects, etc. Since other neighborhood associations operate in this manner, hopefully it's a familiar process. Within the development application form, we're going to provide guidelines on what we're looking at when reviewing proposals, so everyone knows what to expect feedback and questions on. So a little bit more transparency there. I know some people kind of expect to hear about certain things like parking and height, but we want to make it very clear what we're looking at. And when a proposal is up for a vote during an OHNC meeting, we're hoping that it will be met with greater acceptance than we have seen in the past, due to there being more focused feedback provided in a meeting that is solely for providing that feedback on these proposals. So we have a little visual representation of this process. And Jeffrey's Point has a similar little flow chart that they use. So it would start out with this informational development presentation application being submitted. The proposal is presented at the monthly DRC meeting, depending on if it seems like it's good to go, or if we have more questions or feedback that we would like addressed, it might be scheduled for the next meeting. If once it's ready for an OHNC vote, we will schedule it at the monthly OHNC meeting. And then within 48 hours of that meeting, we will request from the developer an ISD refusal letter, list of abutter addresses, and their final presentation slides, so we can provide this to folks before the meeting, before the vote. So then the proposal will be presented and voted on. And then those voting results will be sent out to OHNC members, and the letters of support or non-support are provided to the Zoning Board of Appeal and city officials. So any additional questions I answer tonight, you can send to the orientheightsnc@gmail.com email. Let me minimize that so I can see the chat, see if we have any questions. Let's see. Richard Lynn said, I believe the HVNA meets on the first Monday of the month. So that probably be a conflict with developers that have to present at that one as well. So when I say open to the public, it is open to Orient Heights residents, anyone, especially abutters. And we can also try and be advocates for abutters while they're going through the process of having their own abutters meetings. We can help also voice their concerns in these design review committee meetings. And Richard also asked, is there a threshold for what type of projects need to go through this additional layer of process? And I wouldn't call it an additional layer of process unless you're talking about like the actual application. Because the application hopefully should be pretty straightforward, just a Google form. You can upload your slides and put in contact info and details on the project. It shouldn't be that much more work than sending out an email. And hopefully with us having these forms, for example, we could have one for April and May, and you're thinking, well, I have this thing I want to present in April, and you look and the form's there and you can submit it, and you're guaranteed to have your proposal reviewed in that meeting. Let's see. So we have, if the DRC will now also be presenting at the OHNC meeting, will the number of development projects be limited at the monthly meetings? So it'll only be proposals that are up for a vote. And we do try and limit these in general so they don't take up the majority of the meeting. But hopefully between the informational ones being in a separate meeting and these only being ones that are up for a vote, and our presentation should be fairly brief, just going over the original variances, what we discussed and where we ended up, and then the developer can present on their own. Gail said, I believe all projects should be reviewed, which they would be the same way they are now, just in a different meeting. Let's see. It should be open to everyone that is interested. It doesn't sound very inclusive. It would be open to anybody that is interested. I don't mean to say like people who aren't abutters to the property can't be there. It's anybody that comes to these meetings is welcome to go to those meetings the same. It just would solely be focused on reviewing informational proposals. Let's see. Does this mean the OHNC will only have the ability to vote up or down a project without dialogue with the developer? You can come to these meetings too and have a dialogue with them. And you can also, when it's up for a vote, discuss it at that point. But then of course it will be up for a vote. And we have, not everybody has Facebook. But we will be sending these agendas out just like by email as we do with the regular OHNC meeting agendas and minutes and all that. So it'd be kind of like cutting out the process of having these informational meetings in this regular OHNC meeting, putting them potentially not at the first Monday anymore, as Richard pointed out that Harborview has their meeting then, but putting it at a different meeting. We send out the minutes and where we left off with the developers and their proposals. Gail said, I believe interested parties should be members of this organization and related persons having a connection to the projects proposed. All right. I don't see any additional questions in the chat. Oh, we have who will sit on the committee. So currently it's myself, Gail Miller, Mike Russo, Joanne Mahoney, I want to say his last name. John, I know his last name was the C. I can't remember what it was.
Casa Messina.
Casa Messina, yes.
And Mike Russo and Joanne Pomodoro.
And these are folks that reached out to us at the OHNC@gmail.com email, just saying that they wanted to be a part of it. And that's more so just kind of forming this process and committee. We're not gatekeeping anything. If you want to help like build out the process and everything, you're more than welcome to join us. And Liana said why we are all residents, therefore we have an interest in the neighborhood. But that we're not keeping anybody out of these meetings. So if you have an interest in the neighborhood and what's going on, more than welcome to come to these. We're just trying to have a separate meeting that's entirely focused on this development stuff, and then we can have more community-based things in this monthly meeting, and the votes will still remain here. The Jeffries Point Neighborhood Association, they have like a very detailed website discussing this process that they have. And it's basically the same thing. They have what they call a planning and zoning board. So all of their informational presentations go to that, and then eventually come to the Jeffries Point Neighborhood Association monthly meeting for a vote. And with this, we want to make sure that residents and developers and everybody knows exactly what's going on in this entire process, whether it's like the application process, presenting, how they can provide feedback to zoning, contact information for city officials. We're just trying to make it so when people want to present something or they want to provide feedback on a development, that all the resources are there. And we also have a focused time to like give feedback and ask questions, and hopefully come together with developers and architects and attorneys and be happy with the development in the end. So I don't see any additional questions coming up. So thank you all for letting me present that. And we will, we have one proposal up for a vote tonight. So also on the voting form will be a little blurb. You can say yay or nay if you would like these informational presentations to be moved to the separate meeting. And we'll have to figure out what we're going to do, because if we can't do the first Monday of the month, we don't want to clash with another neighborhood association and then no developer can ever present. So thank you all. And we are going to move on to, so is there a vote to see if it gets to a vote? I don't believe we need a vote to see if it goes to a vote. I think we just need to vote on proposed changes. Oh. And yes, Liliana said, is this committee inform the abutters? We are hoping to be able to inform abutters and work with them, as developers will have their own abutters meetings, but we would like to echo any sentiments that the abutters have. And when it does come to OHNC for a vote, we want to get that list of abutters addresses and reach out to them if possible, welcoming them to our meeting in case they don't get a notice. Let's see. And so Richard said, meaning does the DRC vote to move it forward? And we wouldn't be voting to move it forward to OHNC meetings. We would just be potentially asking more questions, wanting more information, reviews on things. And then once we go through that process once or twice, until we come to an agreement around the changes needed, if any. At that point, we would move forward to the OHNC meeting for a vote. And I think that is all. Ooh. So it could stay in the DRC indefinitely. That's no, we wouldn't want it to just kind of go back and forth forever. What we want is to be able to have an agreement that's met where there's less of you come to the OHNC meeting, present a couple of times with informational things, don't address any of the feedback, and then come for a vote. We're hoping to, with this like more focused feedback, get solutions that are more acceptable to the owners and the architect and everybody involved. We're not trying to delay or extend the process or set some kind of like minimum 3 reviews for a proposal. So I think that is it. And we do have an informational development presentation tonight, as well as a vote. One thing I do want to note, I know everybody in the neighborhood is very passionate about the neighborhood, the look, the culture, and everything. And these architects, owners, developers, attorneys, they're all really proud of the work that they do. So when we are providing feedback on these proposals, if you wouldn't mind making sure that it's on the proposal itself, that would be great. Any sort of personal questions or feedback you have can stay outside of this meeting because we are just focusing on the proposals at hand. So with that, Richard, if you would like to present 76 Montmorency Avenue. Make sure that you're able to unmute.
Thanks, Tony. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Great. Let me call up the screen. Are you able to see that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Richard Lins. I'm the attorney for the Lamatina family, the owners of the 76 Montmorency project that's before the group this evening for an informational presentation. I believe we have Liana Lamatina and her fiance, Angel Rodriguez, on the call with us as well. Unfortunately, Sal's mom recently passed away, so he's not able to join us this evening, but he will certainly be available during the abutters meeting, as well as the hopefully the upcoming voting meeting for Orion Heights. So if there's any specific questions, Liana Lamatina is with us this evening. So just quick background, this has been the Lamatina household probably for almost 30 years. I believe the property was purchased in 1993 and has been occupied as a single family dwelling. The proposal that's before the council this evening is for an addition and change of occupancy to a 2-family dwelling. The renovation of the existing owner-occupied single-family home that sits on a 5,300 square foot parcel. This would involve a lower level addition for some new living space, and will still continue to be occupied by the Lamatina family. Liana and Angel will make this their primary residence, and both Lisa and Sal will be remaining as well in the neighborhood. So a simple change from a single to a 2-family. Quick overview, the site at Montmorency, actually you wouldn't know this if you drove by the site, but there's a paper street that is adjoining the property on the right-hand side. It is located in a 1F 4,000 district. I'll talk a little bit about the zoning that applies to this particular project in the zoning slide, but just so people can have a quick overview of what the site looks like. Bird's eye view here, Montmorency is here, Faywood Ave down the bottom of your screen here. and the site sits here. Tower Street or Tower Road, which is the paper street, actually runs in between these two properties here. It's a discontinued street, so it's no longer used for any accessible travel or any of the rights that the public would have in utilizing that as a street. Again, different view here, just looking back towards the front of the house, and then a bird's eye view here, looking at the right side of the house, looking back up Montmorency, and the left side of the house here. So existing condition, not a lot will change with respect to the front view of the house. The changes that we're proposing mainly are at the back of the property and the right side of the property. We're not really changing much with respect to the roof line or the actual appearance of the main structure, but just a different view of the street views and looking back up on the right side as well. So our site plan here shows the white area is the existing conditions of the property, and our proposed addition is again off to the rear and right side of the property only. This being Tower Street here, there really is no direct abutter on the right side, even though there is a property not far from this, from the right side property line. There is a separation with the paper street. The left side abutter being here, not really impacted much by the proposed addition, which actually has a sufficient enough setback. But again, and I'll show you from the elevations, that most of this addition is being done towards the rear portion of the property, which actually slopes down towards Faywood Ave. So we have our basement floor plan. These are all existing conditions we're showing now, and this is essentially what we're proposing to convert for livable space, which will be the new unit, and then showing the first floor plan of the existing condition, and then the second floor plan. Existing conditions, again, if we're looking at the front of the house here, you can see that it does slope down. There is this sort of covered lanai or rear deck patio area. And again, that's pretty much the extent of where a lot of this addition is going on the right side of the building, if we're looking at the right side. And we're looking at the rear portion of the building here. And again, you see the foundation where the grade actually is much lower than the sidewalk. And then looking here at the left side of the building. So the proposed reprogramming of this would be the basement level, showing living room, bedroom, dining area, kitchen, office den, small balcony, and a sunroom off of the left side. And then you have some additions and modifications that are being made to the main level as well. That would include a master bath with a master bedroom. And then we're not really making any change to the second floor level. All of the changes done at the lower level and the first level towards the rear. So we see here the front elevation. Again, the modifications that would occur are mainly on the right side in the lower portion of the building. We don't come up even any higher than the actual roof line that exists. If we're looking at the rear portion of the property, or I'm sorry, the side elevation, this is the right side, you see the addition off of the rear as well as the entry area off the right side. And then looking at the back of the building, again, the extent of the addition is here. It actually doesn't come any higher than the first level of the existing house. And then we show the sunroom off to the right if you're looking at it from the rear portion of the property. And then again, the left profile elevation is here. And you can see we're not coming any higher than the first level. So from a zoning standpoint, we are proposing this as a two-family dwelling. This is a 1F 4,000 district, and therefore a variance is necessary to change this use from a one-family to a two-family. The minimum lot size in the 1F 4,000 is 4,000 square feet. This lot does comply at almost 5,400 square feet, so no relief necessary. And we do meet the minimum lot width and frontage at just a little over 41 feet. The side yard, and there are already pre-existing conditions that do not meet current zoning of 10 feet. We are proposing a right side of 1.5 and a left of 2.4. We don't change anything with respect to the front yard. The front of the building doesn't come any closer to the sidewalk, and therefore there's no relief necessary for that. Because the addition would come within 29, or actually less than 35 feet, which is allowed, and it's at 29.5 feet from the rear property line, we do need a small variance for the rear yard setback. The floor area ratio, because we are increasing the total square footage from the allowable amount of 2,698 square feet to about 3,300 square feet, we do need a variance for the FAR, which is above the 0.5 that's allowed in the district. Again, we don't change the height of the building. The existing conditions stay the same. So the existing 2.5 story building that's there now doesn't change in height, and therefore no variance was necessary for that. And we do meet the minimum open space. We have well over 1,500 square feet. 750 square feet per unit is what's required, and therefore no variance would be necessary. Last but not least is parking. Article 53 says that for each new unit that you propose on an existing site, you're only required to provide parking for the new unit that's being proposed. In this case, that would be a variance for 1 parking spot, and that's the relief that we're going to be requesting. We elect not to add a curb cut to the site and try to put a vehicle essentially on the front lawn. The city actually frowns upon adding curb cuts where you're only required to provide 1 off-street parking space, and that's the case here, and therefore we'll ask for the variance instead of creating the parking. We have a butters meeting for this project scheduled for February 23rd. That's at 7 p.m. We will flyer the neighborhood accordingly. We are anticipating and hopefully going to be before the Orange Heights Neighborhood Council at their March meeting for a vote on this matter. And this will then go before the Zoning Board of Appeal. This is likely to go before we call the Zoning Board Subcommittee, which is not the full zoning board. It's actually a smaller subset of the 7-member board because this is a up to a 2-family dwelling, which is permitted to go before a subcommittee. Assuming we get our approvals, there'll be BPDA design review that will occur sometime this spring. And then ultimately, once that's concluded, permit issuance would occur perhaps in the spring or summer at the earliest. And we expect about 6 to 8 months for this project to be completed. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments.
Haven't seen any questions come up in the chat yet. All right. If there aren't any questions, which is very surprising for a development presentation. All right.
Okay.
If anything comes up, I guess we can pass it along. Oh, we did get one. Liliana asks, what is a paper street?
So a paper street is either at one point in time has been identified as a public way or a private way that was available for passage either by pedestrian or vehicle, and that it is no longer in use. Usually there's a process what we call discontinuance or abandonment in the city of Boston. And when that occurs, the city no longer maintains it, and therefore it doesn't have any of the characteristics of a street itself. In this case, Tower Street was discontinued a long time ago and hasn't been reintroduced or incorporated as a public way. So we call them paper streets because they only appear typically on paper. We don't see them physically in their form as one would recognize a street.
It's very interesting. Thank you. It doesn't look like we have any additional questions. And we do have the slides for this presentation, so we'll send them along with the meeting minutes. So thank you again for presenting.
Thank you very much. Thanks for accommodating us.
Of course.
You.
So up next for a vote, we have 6-8 St. Andrew Road.
Thanks, Tony. Let me get my presentation pulled up. 1 second, please. Can you all see that okay?
Yep.
Great. Thanks, everybody. We were here last month. My name is Attorney John Haskell, Drago and Toscano, the project attorneys on behalf of Mr. Hamza, the homeowner at 6-8 St. Andrew Road. The architect on this proposal is Timothy Sheehan. As we presented last month, this proposal is the reconfiguration and renovation/extension of the existing deck and porch and the creation of an egress stair for all 3 floors. In addition, there'll be some renovations to the rear basement access stair and door. Our lot size at 6-8 St. Andrew Road is 4,500 square feet, and we are located in a 2F 4,000 district. As I mentioned last month, there's no change to the occupants in this building. This is just the renovation and extension of these porches and stairs. To give you a bit of context, this is the location of the property located on St. Andrew Road off of Bayswater Street. And an aerial view of the property, it's the orange building down here. To briefly go over our zoning analysis, we were cited with 3 zoning violations on the property for side yard, rear yard, and the iPod. Because we are increasing the overall size of that rear porch, we did trigger a variance into the zoning code for the right side yard setback at 6.2 as well. And we are triggering a dimensional violation of the rear yard at 11.9 feet for the rear yard setback because we are increasing the size of that porch. And then finally, we did trigger the East Boston iPod on our zoning code refusal letter. Here's our existing conditions plan. Just gives you a bit of context on the property. There are some existing enclosed porches that would be removed as part of this proposal. They are in poor condition, and this proposal will help not only beautify this property, but actually help with the life and safety by adding some of those egress stairs I mentioned. Again, as I mentioned, the existing floor plans, the existing porch size located on the first and second floor of the dwelling is approximately 26 feet wide by approximately 6 feet long, and those would be removed as part of the proposal. The proposed plot plan here gives a bit of more context into what we're doing here. As you can see in this highlighted area to the rear of the property would be the new proposed porch / deck. And as you can see, we're actually expanding that deck to the right over here. To quickly go over our floor plans before I take any questions, as I mentioned, there will be a new rear access stair and door from the basement. As well on the first floor, the overall size of the deck would be approximately 23 feet wide by 20 feet long, including that new side deck addition. In addition to that, we'll be adding a new egress staircase for the property that carries up the length of the structure. Moving up to the second floor, the porch should be approximately 11 feet, 6 inches wide by approximately 7 feet, 6 inches long. In addition to that, there'll be a new egress stair and canopy over the proposed basement entry we're adding. And then finally, the decks and stairs carry up to the third floor of the structure, which is actually different because there exists no current porch on the third floor. And that size will be a little bit smaller at about approximately 5 feet wide by 7 feet long. And again, as I mentioned, that egress staircase carries up the length of the property. So there will be a new egress door installed for that third level unit, or sorry, the third level of the structure. The elevations of this really give the best context of what we're doing here. As I mentioned, the overall size of the porch will be carrying over more to the right of the structure. And then those new decks and egress stairs will carry up to the highest level of the structure. As well, you can see here that new proposed area stairway and door to the basement of the structure. There have been no changes since our last presentation before the council last month. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Doesn't look like we've had any pop up in the chat. Does Gail have a question?
Yes. Could you show the variances again, please?
Yep, I'd be happy to. Give me 1 second, please. So this is the list of our variances, Gail, that were cited under our zoning code refusal letter, a copy of which we provided to Horry Heights.
All right, hold on one sec. Required. All right, and the abutters, are the abutters here to speak towards this project?
So we did have an abutters meeting a few months ago that was not attended. I know Mr. Ruggiero from next door actually came in last time, and I believe he spoke in favor of the project.
And so there are no butters otherwise responding on either side?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
And do we know they've had notices?
So we actually flyered within 300-foot radius as required by the city. Lena Tremelli, who I believe is on the call, held our required sponsored meeting. In addition to that, we did present last month before the council, and the only feedback we received was from the Ruggiero family, who again, they spoke in favor of the project.
Mm. Yeah, I find it interesting no one responded, but.
We have a question from Ann D saying, is the basement door a new opening? If so, will it serve as an additional apartment?
No, great question. So actually I can pull it up on the plans for you and try and zoom in the best of my ability. So as you can see here on the basement, it's actually a pre-existing door, and we're actually pushing it back to kind of create more of a well. So the door is already pre-existing. And again, this will all only serve and continue to serve as basement storage. So there will be no new dwelling unit down there. It'll continue to remain a 2-family.
All right. Doesn't look like we have any additional questions. If that is the case, we can post the link to vote. Let me do that. And I will also send out the voting form along with meeting minutes. The recording usually takes a while to process, so that won't be up until later. But I'll pass along meeting minutes with all the links that all our presenters provided tonight, and the voting form. And just as a reminder, we do vet everybody that votes for eligibility. So us sharing it via email and posting it on Facebook isn't a worry, because we do check to make sure that everyone meets either the abutters criteria or the last 2 out of the last 3 meetings attendance. So with that, I suppose we will wrap up here. And our next meeting is March 15th. And thank you all for attending, and I will see you in March. Have a wonderful night, everybody.
Thanks, Tony.